Number of banks are joining the discussion on women in banking, which is good. But what about banking for women? Are banks missing a trick by overlooking the needs of their female customers? To help me answer this question, I'm joined by Andy Maguire, partner at Boston Consulting Group. Andy, thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
So what's happening in banking? Are banks aware that female customers may have different needs from male customers? Is this such a big issue? Why should we care?
I'd like to say that they've all got it. Sadly, most haven't, but a few have.
And why only few? Why not the majority of banks?
I think for most people in a bank are male, even the marketing folks. They tend to think of products in terms of what the majority want and where the money is, where they think the money is. And often that means that women are thought of as a secondary issue, and if it is, even if it's secondary, they slap a bit of pink on it, which probably isn't the right answer.
Okay, which is actually an interesting point you've raised. So we went through a period of many shades of pink on credit cards. We've even heard about the credit cards, the position in the Middle East with a mirror on the other side. Have these strategies ever worked for anybody?
No, not surprisingly, it's pretty patronizing and not very popular. Women have often very similar needs, and sometimes very distinct needs, and they have different attitudes to finance, most of them much more sensible than men, and banks are, some of the more thoughtful ones are picking up on those.
So what are the strategies that these more thoughtful banks have embarked upon to serve the customers? For example, in retail, what kind of strategies have worked best? So
I think for a lot of people, actually men and women, finance is a bit threatening. Then people don't feel particularly comfortable with it. For those of us in the industry, it doesn't seem so complicated, but there's huge ranges of credit cards, mortgages, savings accounts. So first of all, women actually would prefer something simpler. By the way, most men would too if they would only admit it, but women will actually tell you that. They're not so easily impressed with some of the things that the industry is slowly finding out isn't very good practice anyway. So things like teaser rates on credit cards and bonus rates on savings accounts, because they can see through them. They're not so gullible as men, I would say. And so they're interested in, frankly, a simpler product range with simpler features, not because they don't understand or they can't understand, but actually they want something that's transparent and fair. By the way, I think that's where the industry's going, so I think women will lead the way in this regard.
So there may be a convergence of perhaps of goals. What has changed for banks that have actually segmented properly this, if we can call it, customer segments?
So at some level women are a segment, and at some level they aren't, right? So there are high earning women, there are low earning women, just as there are for men. They're old, they're young, and all the rest. So just purely basing it on gender probably isn't very sensible. But these days, you take the UK as an example, it's over half the population. In many segments, actually, it's the wealthier and higher earning, some of the professional services, particularly in the younger affluent areas, so more women lawyers than men, that sort of thing. So getting really focused on this and making it work is clearly a sensible thing to do. I mean, it's perfectly fine for everybody to focus on old grey-haired men like me, but we all die eventually, and the next generation there's going to be more wealthy women in it. And particularly in a country like the UK with relatively high rates of divorce, some of them are extremely wealthy, so that's not just retail banking, but it's premier banking and then private banking too.
Are you seeing more banks realizing that there is an untapped potential with their female customers? So has there been any increase in knowledge and awareness of this?
Slowly but surely. So I think that the most progressive actually saw it a while ago and have been acting on it, but on the average, not so much, sadly. I think the key for the people who have been paying attention, they are really quite focused on it, and because the unfortunate thing is, if you look at wealth, it is skewed towards men, but within that, there are pockets where it's skewed towards women. So if you just look at the averages, you'd be more focused on men. If you look beyond the averages, you see the women.
And an interesting estimate that BCG has put together is about the total aggregate income of women around the world, which is $12.5 trillion, which is larger than the GDP of China and India combined. So obviously this is the total package, which is not necessarily reflective of any individual market, but it does help to frame the discussion.
It's a really big deal.
It is so it is a really big deal. Thank you very much for your comments.
You're very welcome.